"Get out! You're embarrassing me in front of everyone." Daniel said it directly into his wife's face at his own birthday party, surrounded by 90 guests in a room she had spent 3 months building for him. His hand gripped her wrist tight enough to leave a mark. His eyes were cold, certain, completely without shame. Emily had paid for every flower in that room, every plate of food, every song the band was playing at that exact moment, and her husband was physically pushing her toward the door like she was an intruder. What Daniel didn't know, what he would spend the rest of his life regretting, was that every single payment for that night ran through one account, hers. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, please subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning of Daniel Carter's 42nd birthday, Emily woke up before the sun. She didn't need an alarm. She hadn't needed one in years. Her body had learned long ago to rise early to start working before the rest of the world opened its eyes, because there was always something that needed doing, some detail that needed checking, some responsibility sitting quietly at the edge of her mind, waiting for her attention. She made coffee, she opened her planner, and she went through the checklist she had been building for the past 3 months. The venue, Lorenzo's Event Hall on 5th Street, was confirmed. The catering company had called the night before to confirm the final head count, 92 guests. The photographer was scheduled to arrive at 6 1 hour before guests. The custom cake, 3 tiers dark chocolate with gold detailing, exactly the kind of thing Daniel had pointed to in a magazine 8 months earlier and said, "That's what I want if we ever do something big," was being delivered at 5:30. The band had been paid a deposit. The bar tab was set up under her card. Every single thing on that list had been researched, negotiated, confirmed, and paid for by Emily Carter. Not because Daniel asked her to, not because it was her job, because for 10 years of marriage, Emily Carter had been the kind of woman who simply made things happen. Quietly, competently, without recognition, without applause, and increasingly without acknowledgement of any kind. She sat at the kitchen table that morning and felt something she didn't quite have a name for yet. It wasn't dread. It wasn't excitement. It was something thinner and more tired than either of those things, like a person who has been carrying a heavy bag for so long that they've forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. She finished her coffee, set the mug in the sink, and got to work. The first sign that the evening would go wrong came at 2 in the afternoon. Emily was at the venue supervising the setup, talking to the florist about the centerpieces, walking through the lighting changes with the venue coordinator, when her phone rang. It was Daniel. "Hey," he said. His voice was flat, not the voice of a man who was excited about his own birthday party, the voice of a man who was tolerating something. "Hey," Emily said. "I'm at the venue. Everything is looking beautiful. The flowers came out even better than I expected. I need to talk to you about the guest list." Emily stopped walking. "What about it? We finalized it 3 weeks ago. I invited a few extra people. Daniel, the head count is already set. The catering. It's fine, Emily. They'll figure it out. It's not a big deal." She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. "How many extra people? Maybe 4 or 5. Maybe. Look, I'm not going to argue about this. It's my birthday. I should be able to invite who I want." She wanted to say, "Then you should have been involved in planning it." She wanted to say, "I submitted the final head count to the caterers 2 days ago, and every additional plate costs $65. She wanted to say, "Who are these people you're inviting at the last minute to a party I've been building for 3 months?" Instead, she said, "I'll handle it," because that was what she always said. She called the caterer. She adjusted the count. She absorbed the extra cost without a word. What she didn't ask, not yet, was who were the extra people set. By 6 o'clock, the room was stunning. Emily stood near the entrance and looked at what she had built. Warm gold lighting stretched across the ceiling. Round tables were covered in deep navy linen with ivory candles at the center. The bar was fully stocked. The band was doing a quiet sound check in the corner. Photographs of Daniel through the years. Some from before, Emily knew him, some from their early marriage, some from the last decade, were arranged along one wall in matching frames she had picked out and ordered herself. It looked like love. It looked like everything a person could want a room to say about them. Daniel arrived at 6:40 with a group of his coworkers. He walked in with his jacket slightly open, laughing at something someone had said, and when he crossed the threshold and saw the room, he slowed down for just a moment. Emily watched him from across the space. She watched him take it in the flowers, the lighting, the photographs, the perfectly set tables, the full bar, the three-tiered cake that hadn't been cut yet, and she waited. She waited for the moment when his eyes would find hers, when he would cross the room and put his hand on her shoulder and say, "This is incredible. Thank you." He looked at the room for 3 seconds. Then he turned back to his coworkers and said, "Pretty good, right?" And they laughed, and he moved toward the bar, and Emily stood near the entrance alone. She told herself it was fine. She told herself he would find her later. She smoothed the front of her dress and went to check on the caterers. The party moved quickly into its rhythm after that. Guests arrived, the room filled with laughter and the clink of glasses. The band played something low and warm. People found each other across tables, leaned in close to share stories, held drinks, and gestured and smiled. Emily moved through the room like a current running under still water. She checked with the catering staff. She caught a small problem with a table assignment before it became an issue. She made sure Daniel's mother, Margaret, had been seated properly and had everything she needed. Margaret Carter was 67 years old, a small woman with careful eyes and silver hair pulled back neatly. She had always been kind to Emily, not in the way some mothers-in-law are kind performing warmth for appearances, but in the way of someone who genuinely recognized something in another person and honored it. "You did all of this," Margaret said when Emily stopped by her table. It wasn't a question. "I wanted it to be special for him," Emily said. Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "You always do," she said, and there was something in her voice, something Emily didn't fully understand yet, that sounded less like admiration and more like sorrow. It was around 8 o'clock when Emily first noticed the woman. She was standing near the bar with Daniel's group of coworkers, young late 20s, Emily guessed. Dark hair, bright dress, the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having had to worry about the details. She was laughing at something Daniel said, leaning slightly toward him when she laughed the way people do when they want someone to notice they're laughing. Emily watched for a moment. Then she told herself she was being paranoid. She had a party to manage. She went back to work. But over the next hour, she noticed it again and again. The way Daniel stayed close to that cluster near the bar. The way his body angled toward the young woman when he talked. The way he smiled, not his party smile, not the public smile she had seen for 10 years, but something looser and more genuine, the smile of a man who was not performing anything. Emily recognized that smile. She hadn't seen it directed at her in a long time. She felt something cold move through her chest. She picked up a glass of water and held it, and she reminded herself where she was, what she had built, what tonight was supposed to be. She walked to where Daniel was standing. "Hey," she said, "are you having a good time?" Daniel turned to look at her. The smile stayed on his face, but it shifted slightly, became something more careful. "Yeah," he said, "it's great." "Good. The cake is going to be cut in about 20 minutes. I want to get everyone seated first." "Right," he said. "Sure." He turned back to his coworkers. Emily stood there for 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats. No one introduced her. Daniel didn't introduce her. She was standing in a room she had built at a party she had paid for, and her husband did not introduce her to the people she was standing beside. She walked away. At 8:45, Emily was standing near the back of the room, reviewing her phone to check whether the photographer had gotten the family group shot she had requested when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Daniel was walking toward her, and the look on his face stopped her immediately. Not the look of a husband seeking out his wife at a party. The look of a man who had made a decision. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was low, controlled, the voice he used in arguments when he had already decided he was right. "Okay," Emily said carefully. "Is something wrong?" "You need to stop." She blinked. "Stop what?" "Watching me. You've been watching me all night and it's—" He stopped, looked around, then back at her. "It's uncomfortable. People are noticing." Emily felt the cold thing move through her chest again, faster this time. "Daniel, I've been managing the party. That's what I've been doing all night." "It doesn't look like that. It looks like you're keeping tabs on me." That's not what—" "Emily." His voice dropped. His jaw tightened. "I'm trying to enjoy my birthday." She stared at him. "I know. That's why I planned all of this. 3 months, Daniel. I planned this for— I didn't ask you to do all of that." The words landed like something physical. She felt them in her sternum. "What?" she whispered. I'm just saying, you always overdo everything. You make everything about you and how much you do, and it gets exhausting. Emily looked at her husband. At the man she had driven to the emergency room at 2 a.m. 7 years ago when his appendix ruptured. At the man whose business dinners she had attended and whose career conversations she had listened to and whose shirts she had ironed without a word of complaint. At the man whose entire birthday celebration, every flower, every plate, every note of music, every bite of food, she had single-handedly constructed over 90 days. "I make everything about me," she repeated. "Look," he said, "I'm not trying to fight. He glanced back toward the bar, toward his co-workers, toward the young woman in the bright dress. "I just think maybe it would be better if you headed home. Let me have the rest of the night." Emily went very still. "You want me to leave," she said. "I think it would be easier, for both of us." "Easier." Her voice was completely flat now. Not hurt, not angry. Something beyond both of those things. Something that had passed through the fire and come out the other side. "You want me to leave the party I planned, the party I paid for, on your birthday." Daniel's expression flickered. Something like discomfort crossed his face just for a second, and then his jaw set again. "Emily, don't make this dramatic." "Daniel." She said his name slowly, the way you say something you want to remember. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "Yes," he said, without hesitating. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she nodded. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She said, "Okay." She picked up her purse from the chair near the wall. She walked to Margaret's table and bent down and said very quietly, "I need to go. I'll call you." Margaret grabbed her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. Emily gently freed her hand. She walked through the center of the room, past the tables with their navy linen and ivory candles, past the photographs on the wall, past the 3-tiered cake waiting to be cut, and she pushed open the front door. She heard behind her Daniel saying something to his friends. She heard laughter. She heard the band shift into a new song. The door closed behind her, and she was outside. The night air was warm. The parking lot was quiet. Emily stood still for a moment. She could feel her heartbeat, even, steady, slower than it had any right to be. She reached into her purse and took out her phone. She found the number for Lorenzo's event hall and pressed call. The venue coordinator picked up on the second ring. "Yes, Mrs. Carter." Emily's voice was completely calm. "I need to cancel the services effective immediately. Please have the catering staff begin packing up. The bar is closed. The band can stop at the end of their current song." Silence on the line. "Mrs. Carter, there are still guests." "I understand. The event is over. All payments were made through my account, and that remains unchanged. Please proceed." She ended the call. She called the photographer next. "You can head out. We're done for the evening. Thank you for your work tonight." She called the head of catering. She sent a text to the florist who had stayed to manage the centerpiece lighting. She made 5 calls in 6 minutes, standing in the parking lot in her party dress, her voice never wavering once. Then she put her phone in her purse. Then she walked to her car. And as she opened the door, she heard it beginning behind her. The music stopped mid-song, and through the walls of Lorenzo's event hall, she could hear the murmur of 90 guests going suddenly collectively quiet, wondering what was happening. She got in the car. She started the engine. She did not look in the rearview mirror. Inside the hall. Daniel was in the middle of a conversation when the music cut off. He turned toward the band. The musicians were looking at each other confused, setting down instruments. Across the room, the bar staff had stopped moving. A server appeared from the kitchen and said something to the catering manager, who immediately picked up a phone. Daniel walked toward the bar. "Hey, what's going on? Why did the music stop?" The bartender, a young man in a black vest, looked genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir. We've been notified the event has been terminated." Daniel stared at him. "Terminated? What does that mean? Who terminated it?" The bartender glanced down at his phone screen. "The account holder, sir. The event was canceled." Daniel felt something land in his stomach. "The account holder," he repeated slowly. From across the room, Margaret stood up from her table. She had not moved in 15 minutes, but she stood up now, and she looked at her son, and there was an expression on her face that Daniel had never seen directed at him before. It was not sympathy, it was recognition. "Daniel," she said from 30 feet away, in a room that had gone almost entirely silent. "What did you do?" He turned back toward the front door. The doors where Emily had walked out 6 minutes ago. And for the first time all evening, Daniel Carter had nothing to say. The guests began to understand what was happening before anyone explained it. This is how it works in rooms full of people. The silence reaches them first, and then the absence of things follows. No music, no bartender pouring drinks, the catering staff carrying trays toward the kitchen instead of away from it. Servers appearing with apology on their faces, quietly letting tables know the evening was drawing to a close. 90 people sat or stood in Lorenzo's event hall and slowly arrived at the same quiet understanding. The party was over. Not because the night had ended, because someone had ended it. Daniel stood in the center of the room. His co-workers had gone quiet beside him. Rachel, the young woman in the bright dress, the woman he had specifically wanted present tonight, the woman he had invited at the last minute along with 4 others, the woman Emily had noticed leaning close when she laughed, was now standing slightly apart from the group, uncertain, looking at the floor. Margaret walked across the room toward her son. She was not rushing. She was walking the way a woman walks when she has already decided what she needs to say and simply needs to cover the distance. She stopped in front of him. "Your wife did all of this," Margaret said, not as a question. "Mom, every detail in this room, she did it." Margaret looked around at what remained, the flowers that were still beautiful, the photographs still hanging on the wall, the 3-tiered cake that had never been cut. "And you sent her home." "It's complicated," Daniel said. "Is it—" His mother's voice was very quiet. "Or is it simple? Because from where I'm standing, it looks very simple." "She was making me uncomfortable." "She was here," Margaret said. "She was here, and she built all of this, and she made you look like a man worth celebrating, and you sent her home." She paused. "Who did you have her replaced with, Daniel?" He said nothing. Margaret looked across the room toward where Rachel was standing, and then she looked back at her son, and the expression on her face did not change, but something in her eyes did. She picked up her purse from the chair beside her. "Call me when you understand what you've done," she said, and she walked toward the exit. Daniel spent the next 40 minutes trying to salvage the evening. He asked the venue staff if they could start the music again. He was told that the sound equipment had been contracted through the event account, and the account had been closed. He asked the bar if they could continue serving. He was told that the bar tab had been canceled and cash payment would be required for any additional service. He walked back toward the catering area and found the kitchen nearly stripped, the warming trays empty and stacked. His friends tried to help. One of them offered to call a bar nearby. Someone else suggested they just move the group somewhere else, make a night of it, start over. But something had already broken. The room had seen what it had seen. 90 people had watched the music stop. They had watched the bar close. They had watched the staff begin quietly, efficiently, methodically dismantling the birthday party of Daniel Carter, while Daniel Carter stood in the center of it with his arms at his sides. And everyone in that room understood, even if they didn't say it, even if they would be tactful about it later, even if they would phrase it gently when they described this night to their own families, everyone in that room understood exactly what had happened. A man had looked at the woman who built his world and told her to leave, and she had left, and she had taken everything with her. Emily drove home without the radio. She sat at the kitchen table. She didn't turn on many lights. She opened her laptop mostly out of habit, the way you reach for something familiar when the ground has shifted. She looked at the screen for a while without seeing it, and then she started thinking. Not about the party, not about Daniel's face when he said, "You're ruining my night," not about the young woman in the bright dress leaning toward him when she laughed. She started thinking about the years. 10 years of early mornings and managed logistics and kept calendars and paid bills and tracked accounts. 10 years of being the person who remembered the dentist appointment and the insurance renewal and the car service and the quarterly taxes. 10 years of attending Daniel's work events and listening to his work conversations and learning the names of his clients and colleagues so she could ask about them by name because it mattered to him. 10 years. And she found herself wondering for the first time in a very long time, honestly wondering what she actually knew about their finances. She trusted Daniel completely. She always had. He handled the investment accounts. She handled the daily expenses. That was the agreement they had fallen into over the years. He was good with long-term strategy, he always said. She was good with the day-to-day. They were a team. She opened their bank's online portal. She logged into the joint checking account. She looked at the transactions going back 6 months. At first, everything looked normal. Utilities, groceries, her event planning subscriptions, his gas, the mortgage, normal things. But then she started looking more carefully. There was a payment to a vendor she didn't recognize, $600. There was another 2 weeks later, $420. There was a transfer out of the account, not a bill, not a vendor, just a transfer for $3,000. In April. She hadn't seen it before because she had been deep in party planning and hadn't been watching the joint account closely. She clicked on the transfer. It showed the destination account as a 4-digit number she didn't recognize. She sat back in her chair. She pressed her fingers flat against the table. She told herself there was an explanation. She told herself this didn't have to mean what it looked like. And then she told herself something else, something quieter and more honest, that she had been telling herself there was an explanation for a lot of things lately, and that the explaining had started to feel like something other than reassurance. She opened a fresh document on her laptop. She started writing down what she had found. Dates, amounts, account numbers. Her handwriting, or in this case her typing, was neat and organized because that was what Emily Carter did. Even when her hands wanted to shake, her mind found its structure. She pulled up 6 more months of transactions, and she kept looking. She was still at the table 2 hours later when her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't know. She opened it. It read, "Emily, this is Margaret. I got your number from your own contact card. You put them on all the tables tonight. I just wanted you to know I left as soon as I could. I am so sorry for what you witnessed tonight. You deserve none of that. Please call me when you're ready." Emily read the message twice. Then she set the phone down. Margaret had left when she left. Margaret had walked out of her own son's birthday party. Emily thought about that for a while. She thought about what Margaret had said at her table earlier in the evening, "You always do," and the sadness in her voice when she said it. She picked her phone back up. She texted back, "Thank you, Margaret. I'll call you soon. I'm okay." She put the phone face down on the table. She looked back at her laptop screen, at the list of transactions she had started building, at the transfer to an account she didn't recognize, at $600 paid to a vendor she had never heard of. She thought about the young woman in the bright dress. She thought about Daniel's voice when he said, "I didn't ask you to do all of that." And Emily Carter, who was 35 years old and organized and competent and had spent a decade being the person who made things possible, made a very quiet and very significant decision. She was going to find out exactly what was true. Not because she was angry, because she had earned the right to know. She opened a new browser tab. She started with what she knew: the date of the transfer, the amount, the partial account number. And she began. By 3 in the morning, she had 4 pages of notes. She had found inconsistencies she couldn't explain away. Patterns that individually might have been mistakes or oversights. But together, laid out in her neat, organized document, they told a different story. Money moving out of their joint account in amounts small enough not to trigger immediate concern. Payments to businesses she couldn't find records of. Tax refunds from the previous year that she remembered expecting, but that had never appeared in their joint account, and now she couldn't find where they had gone. And one thing that she kept returning to, that she couldn't move past: the transfer in April. $3,000. To an account that was not their mortgage company, not their investment firm, not any institution she recognized. Where had it gone? She closed her laptop at 3:15. She sat in the quiet kitchen. Outside, the neighborhood was completely still. No cars, no voices, nothing but the ordinary silence of an ordinary house in an ordinary suburb of Austin, Texas, where a woman sat alone at a table that still had a party planner's notebook on it, where the grocery list for tonight's gathering was still stuck under a magnet on the refrigerator, where the morning coffee mug she'd rinsed and set in the drying rack 14 hours ago was still sitting exactly where she'd left it. Emily pressed her palms flat against the table. She had spent 3 months planning a party for a man who had just told her to leave it. She had spent 10 years building a life for a marriage that she now realized she might not fully understand. She had spent 35 years being competent and capable and quietly carrying things that no one else noticed. Tonight she had walked out of that party with nothing but her purse and her phone. And in 4 hours of sitting at this kitchen table, she had already found more than she expected. She thought about what she still hadn't found. She thought about what she was going to do next. She stood up. She went to the cabinet and got a glass. She filled it with water from the tap and drank it slowly, standing at the sink. She set the glass down. She went to get her laptop charger, because she wasn't done yet. She was, in fact, just beginning. And whatever she found, whatever the full truth turned out to be, Emily Carter was going to find it the same way she found everything, methodically, completely, with every detail accounted for and every thread followed to its end. The man who had told her to leave had forgotten one thing. She had never in 10 years left anything unfinished. She didn't sleep that night, not even close. Emily sat at that kitchen table until the sun came through the window, and when it did, she didn't move to make breakfast or turn on the television or do any of the normal things a person does when a new day begins. She just sat there with her laptop open and her notes beside her, and the growing quiet certainty that what she had found in those first 4 hours was only the beginning of something much larger than she had allowed herself to believe. Her coffee went cold. She didn't notice. The house was silent. Daniel hadn't come home. She had not called him. He had not called her. The absence of that call, the fact that her husband had not once picked up his phone to ask where she was or whether she was okay, after physically pushing her toward the door of his own birthday party, told her something she didn't need a spreadsheet to understand. She picked up her pen. She wrote at the top of a fresh page, "What do I actually know?" And then she sat with that question, because it was the most honest thing she had asked herself in a very long time. She knew the joint account. She knew her own spending. She knew the household bills, the mortgage, the insurance, the subscriptions, the grocery averages, the utility cycles. She knew those things the way a person knows their own handwriting instinctively without effort, because she had been managing them for years. What she didn't know was everything Daniel managed. The investment accounts, the retirement portfolio, the savings account they had opened together 6 years ago with the intention of buying a bigger house someday, the tax returns, the business expenses he wrote off through his sales position. She had trusted him with all of it, because they were a team. That was what she had believed. She opened the laptop again and navigated back to the bank portal. This time she didn't look at 6 months. She went back 3 years. And she started at the beginning. It took her 2 hours to get through the first year alone, not because the transactions were complicated, but because she was reading carefully, slowly, the way you read something when you know you cannot afford to miss anything. For the first year, everything looked clean. Then she hit month 14, a transfer, $800, to an account number she wrote down carefully. She kept going. Month 17, another transfer, $1,200, same account. Month 19, $1,500. The amounts were growing. She sat back and looked at what she had written. 5 transfers across 8 months totaling just under $6,000, all going to the same account, an account that was not connected to any bill or vendor or institution she recognized. She felt the cold thing in her chest again, the same thing she had felt when Daniel smiled after telling her to leave. Except this time it was sharper, more specific, less like grief and more like the moment before you understand something you cannot ununderstand. She picked up her phone. She called her bank directly. "I need to inquire about a series of transfers from my joint checking account," she said, when the representative answered. Her voice was steady. "I'm seeing transfers to an account I don't recognize, and I want to know if there's any additional information you can provide about the destination." The representative was polite, professional. He told her that from the joint account, both account holders had equal authority to initiate transfers, and that the destination account on record was not linked to any fraud flags. He could not tell her the owner of the destination account, but he could tell her one thing: the destination account had been opened 18 months ago. 18 months ago. Emily thanked him and ended the call. She sat very still. 18 months ago, she and Daniel had been talking about vacation plans, about maybe finally taking that trip to Portugal they had been postponing for 3 years, about their savings account and how close they were getting to their down payment goal. 18 months ago, someone had opened a separate account, and since then, nearly $6,000 had flowed into it from their shared money. She wrote the number 18 months at the top of her page and circled it 3 times. Then she kept going. By noon, she had found 11 transfers, total just over $14,000. She stood up from the table for the first time in hours. She walked to the window. She looked at the street outside, completely ordinary quiet, a neighbor's dog being walked, a car backing out of a driveway 2 houses down. She pressed her forehead against the glass for exactly 10 seconds. Then she walked back to the table and sat down, because she still wasn't done. The transfers were one thing, but something else had been nagging at her since the night before the vendor payments. those $600 and $400 charges to businesses she didn't recognize. She went back to those now, writing down every vendor name she had flagged. She started searching them one by one. The first 3 came back as small, legitimate businesses: a software subscription, a professional association fee, things Daniel might reasonably have paid for without mentioning them. The 4th one stopped her cold. It was a restaurant, a nice one, downtown Austin. She recognized the name because she had walked past it once and thought she'd like to take Daniel there for their anniversary. She had never been inside it. She looked at the date of the charge, a Tuesday evening in February. She thought back to February. Daniel had been at a regional sales conference that week. He had been gone Tuesday through Thursday. She looked at the charge amount: $340 for a Tuesday dinner for one person at a regional sales conference. She clicked back to the transactions and looked at February more carefully. There was a hotel charge. She recognized the conference hotel Daniel always stayed at for the regional meetings, a mid-range business hotel she had heard him complain about because the Wi-Fi was slow. But there was also a second hotel charge. Same week, different hotel. A hotel she recognized immediately because it was one of the nicest in Austin. Not the kind of hotel you stay at for a regional sales conference. $480 for 2 nights. Emily looked at that number for a long time. She wrote it down. She wrote the restaurant name beside it. She wrote the date. She drew a line connecting them. Her hand was completely steady. She picked up her phone again, not to call Daniel, not to call a friend. She opened her contacts and scrolled until she found a name she hadn't needed in years: Sarah Mitchell, attorney. Emily had met Sarah at a neighborhood event 3 years ago. They had exchanged numbers the way people do at neighborhood events, casually without expectation. But Emily had kept the number because Sarah had said something that stayed with her: "I do family law. If you ever need someone who will be honest with you about where you stand, call me." Emily had thought at the time, "I'll never need that." She stared at Sarah's number now. She pressed call. Sarah picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hello. Sarah, this is Emily Carter. We met at the Hendersons event about 3 years ago. I don't know if you remember me." A beat of silence. "I remember you," Sarah said. "You brought that incredible lemon cake." Despite everything, Emily almost smiled. "That's right. I need to talk to someone, professionally, if you have time." Sarah's voice shifted slightly, not dramatically, but Emily heard it. The shift from social to professional, from casual to careful. "Of course. Can you come in today?" "Yes," Emily said. "What time?" 2 o'clock. "I'll be there." She ended the call. She looked at the clock. She had 3 hours. She went back to the laptop. She was going to walk into that office with everything organized. Every date, every amount, every vendor, every transfer, every inconsistency laid out in order, clear and complete, because that was the only way Emily Carter knew how to do anything. She had 3 hours. She used all of them. By the time she walked out the front door with a folder of printed documents and a notebook full of organized notes, she had found 17 financial inconsistencies spanning 3 years. She had found a pattern of transfers to an unknown account totaling $14,000. She had found a hotel and restaurant pairing on a week when Daniel claimed to be at a conference in a budget hotel. She had found 2 additional restaurant charges she could not explain. And she had found that the tax refund from 2 years ago, a refund. She remembered expecting a refund she and Daniel had talked about using for the vacation fund, had never appeared in their joint account. She had no idea yet where it had gone, but she was going to find out. She locked the front door behind her. She got in her car. She drove to Sarah Mitchell's office with her folder on the passenger seat and her hands steady on the wheel. The radio stayed off. She didn't need noise right now. She needed to think. Sarah Mitchell's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that Emily had driven past hundreds of times without ever going inside. The waiting area was quiet and clean, with chairs that were comfortable without being pretentious, and a receptionist who offered Emily water and did not ask why she was there. Emily sat and waited with her folder in her lap and her back straight. At 2 o'clock exactly, Sarah appeared in the doorway. She was a woman in her mid-40s, compact and precise, with dark hair cut short and eyes that assessed quickly and gave nothing away. She shook Emily's hand firmly. "Come in." Emily sat across from her desk. Sarah sat down, folded her hands, and said, "Tell me what's happening." Emily opened her folder. "My husband told me to leave his birthday party last night," she said. "A party I planned and paid for entirely, in front of 90 people." She set the first page on the desk. "And when I came home and started looking at our financial records, I found this." She talked for 22 minutes without stopping. She laid out everything she had found in the order she had found it, with the documentation supporting each point, and she did not cry once, and she did not raise her voice, and she did not editorialize or speculate. She presented facts, dates, amounts, patterns. When she finished, she folded her hands in her lap and waited. Sarah looked at the papers on her desk for a long moment. Then she looked up at Emily and said something Emily would think about for a long time afterward. "You didn't come in here with suspicions," Sarah said. "You came in here with evidence." Emily nodded slowly. "What you're describing," Sarah continued, "is not just emotional betrayal. If these numbers hold up, and from what I'm looking at they appear consistent, you may be looking at deliberate financial concealment, which is a very different conversation than infidelity." Emily felt something settle in her chest. Not relief, not quite, more like the specific clarity that comes when someone else sees what you see and confirms that you are not imagining it. "What do I do?" Emily asked. Sarah leaned forward. "First, you do not touch anything. Do not move money. Do not close accounts. Do not confront him yet. Second, you let me get a financial forensic specialist to look at what you've found, because what you've pulled together is a strong start, but we need someone who can go deeper than the online portal." She paused. "Third, and this is important, Emily, you need to understand that from this moment forward, everything you do matters. Every conversation, every text, every decision. Are you ready for that?" Emily looked at her steadily. "I've been ready for longer than I knew," she said. Sarah nodded once. "Okay, then let's talk about next steps." They talked for another 40 minutes. By the time Emily walked back out to the parking lot, the afternoon light was going golden and long. She stood beside her car for a moment and felt the weight of everything she was carrying, not the crushing, suffocating weight of the night before, but something different, something with structure. A weight she understood, a weight she knew how to manage. She got in the car. Her phone showed 2 missed calls from Daniel. She looked at his name on the screen for a long moment. She put the phone in her purse without calling back. She drove home. Daniel came home at 7 that evening. She heard his key in the lock, and she was sitting in the living room, not in the dark, not dramatically, just sitting with a book she wasn't reading. And when he came through the door, she looked up at him with an expression that she had spent the afternoon building. Neutral, calm, giving nothing away. He stood in the doorway. He looked tired. Something about the set of his jaw told her the night before had not gone the way he planned after she left. "We need to talk," he said. "Okay," she said. He came and sat across from her. He put his elbows on his knees and he looked at the floor for a moment, and then he looked at her. "Last night got out of hand," he said. "Yes," Emily said. "It did. I said some things I shouldn't have said." She waited. "I was stressed," he said. It's been a lot. I took it out on you, and that wasn't fair." Emily looked at him, at his face, at the face she had known for 10 years and 12 years total, counting the 2 years before they married. She was looking for something specific, not remorse, but honesty. Some sign that what he was saying was connected to something true. What she saw instead was management. He was managing her. The same tone he used in meetings she imagined. The measured acknowledgement of an error designed to neutralize rather than resolve. He wasn't apologizing. He was performing an apology precisely calibrated to the minimum amount required to make her stop being a problem. "You called me a problem," she said. He blinked. "What?" "You told me I was a problem when you asked me to leave. You said I was making people uncomfortable and that it would be better for both of us if I went home." She kept her voice level. "I'm not paraphrasing. Those were your words." "I didn't mean, and you didn't call me," she continued, the same level tone. "After I left. You didn't call to check if I was okay. You didn't text. Nothing. I was home alone until after 2 in the morning, and my husband of 10 years did not contact me once." Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. "Who did you invite last minute?" Emily asked. Something moved behind his eyes. Quick, guarded. "Some people from work." "How many? 5. Was Rachel Morgan one of them?" The silence that followed was less than 2 seconds long, but Emily counted every fraction of it. "She's a colleague," Daniel said. "I know she's a colleague," Emily said. I'm asking if she was one of the 5 people you invited at the last minute to your birthday party. Yes, he said, along with others. Okay, Emily said, and she stood up. She picked up her book. She said, I'm going to bed. I have an early morning tomorrow. And she walked toward the bedroom, and she felt his eyes on her back, and she felt the confusion rolling off him, because she had not cried, she had not screamed, she had not demanded answers or thrown anything, or given him the dramatic scene he had probably been bracing for, and she heard him say behind her, Emily, that's it. She stopped walking. She turned around. That's it for tonight, she said, and she went to bed. She did not sleep well, but she slept. When she woke at 5:30 the next morning, Daniel was still in bed, and her mind was already moving. She lay still for exactly 10 minutes, cataloging what she knew and what she still needed to find, and then she got up quietly and went to the kitchen. She made coffee. She opened her laptop. She had one more thing she wanted to check before Sarah's specialist started the formal review, something that had been sitting at the edge of her mind since the night before, something small that she kept returning to. The consulting company. It had come up in her late-night search in a way she hadn't fully processed at 3 in the morning because her brain had been nearing its limit. She had found a business registration in Texas, a one-person LLC registered 18 months ago, the same month the separate bank account was opened. The business name meant nothing to her, but the registered agent's address was a mailbox service downtown. Not Daniel's office address, not their home address, a mailbox service. She searched the business name again now, fresh in the morning light. She found a basic website, clean, minimal, vague, the kind of website that exists to establish legitimacy without providing information. Business consulting, tailored solutions for regional growth markets, a contact form, no phone number, no listed clients. She searched the business name alongside Daniel's name. Nothing came up directly. She searched the business name alongside the address of the mailbox service. And there, in a state business filing database, she had to click through 4 pages to find she saw a secondary officer listing. The name was not Daniel Carter. It was a name she had never seen before. She wrote it down. She sat back and looked at what she had assembled across 3 days of looking. The transfers, the hotel, the restaurant, the tax refund that never appeared. The LLC registered the same month as the hidden bank account. The secondary officer with the unfamiliar name. She thought about what Sarah had said, not just emotional betrayal. She picked up her phone. She texted Sarah, I found something else. Can we talk this morning? Sarah responded in 4 minutes. I'll call you at 8. Emily looked at the clock. An hour and 15 minutes. She went back to her notes. She was not angry. She kept checking, kept looking at what she was feeling, the way you monitor a temperature, and what she found was not anger. It was something colder and more durable than anger, a kind of crystalline focus that she recognized from the hardest moments of her life, the moments when everything got very clear and very quiet, and she understood exactly what needed to be done. She had felt it once before, years ago, when her mother was sick and the doctors were inconsistent, and Emily had spent 2 weeks researching treatment options and coordinating between 3 different specialists until she found the answer they needed. Everyone around her had been crying. Emily had been on the phone. She felt it now. She had 4 pages of new notes by the time Sarah called. Tell me, Sarah said, no preamble. Emily told her about the LLC, about the secondary officer, about the timing 18 months ago, identical to the hidden account. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Emily, I want you to listen to me carefully. What you're describing now goes beyond what a standard divorce filing covers. If he has been operating a concealed business entity and running money through it that is potentially fraudulent transfer of marital assets, that is a significantly more serious legal matter. Emily felt something move through her. Not fear. Something adjacent to awe. The particular awe of realizing that a thing you thought you understood is actually much larger. How serious, she asked. Serious enough that I want our financial specialist on this by end of week, Sarah said. And serious enough that when this goes in front of a judge, the conversation about asset division is going to look very different than a standard dissolution. She paused. How are you holding up? Emily looked at her 4 pages of notes. I'm fine, she said. You don't have to be, Sarah said. I know, Emily said, but I am. There was a brief silence, and Emily heard in it the same thing she had heard in Margaret's voice at the party. Not just acknowledgement, but recognition. The recognition of someone seeing another person clearly. "I'll have the specialist contact you today," Sarah said. "Thank you," Emily said. She set the phone down. She looked at the kitchen around her, at the table where she had sat on the night Daniel told her to leave his birthday party, and she had started pulling at a single thread, at the laptop that had been open for most of the last 48 hours, at the coffee mug she kept refilling without tasting, at the folder of documents she had built into something that was now, according to a family attorney, potentially significant legal evidence. She thought about Daniel sleeping in the next room. She thought about him waking up and coming into this kitchen in 20 minutes and pouring his coffee and asking what she wanted to do about dinner tonight, because that was the kind of thing Daniel did when he was trying to normalize something, moved straight past it, acted as though the map of ordinary life would hold even after the ground beneath it had shifted. She thought about the man who had gripped her wrist at his own birthday party and told her to get out. She thought about the account opened 18 months ago. She thought about the LLC. She thought about a restaurant charge for $340 on a Tuesday night when Daniel was supposed to be at a budget conference hotel complaining about the Wi-Fi. And she thought about 10 years. 10 years of being the person behind everything. The person who kept the calendar and managed the money and planned the parties and attended the dinners and learned the names of colleagues and ironed the shirts and made the lists and followed up on the details and quietly, reliably, invisibly built the scaffolding that held Daniel Carter's life together. The woman he had gripped by the wrist, the woman he had told to leave, the woman he had described in a message, and this she still didn't know yet. This was still coming. This was the thing that would matter most as a situation to be handled. She didn't know about the messages yet, but she would. She was going to find everything. Not because she wanted to hurt him, because 10 years of her life was inside that marriage, and she had earned the right to know exactly what those 10 years had contained. She picked up her pen. She opened to a fresh page in her notebook. At the top, she wrote a name, the name of the secondary officer on the LLC, and she started looking. Part 3. The deeper the truth, the worse it got. The name at the top of Emily's notebook was James Whitfield. She didn't know who James Whitfield was. She had never heard Daniel mention that name in 10 years of marriage. It didn't appear in any of their shared documents, their tax filings, their contact lists, or any conversation she could remember. It was simply a name attached to a business entity registered 18 months ago, listed as secondary officer of an LLC that had been created at the exact same time a secret bank account appeared in their financial history. It was a name that had no business being connected to her life, and yet there it was. She started with the basics. She searched the name in combination with Austin, Texas. She found a LinkedIn profile sparse, minimal, the kind of profile someone sets up to exist rather than to be found. James Whitfield, business development consultant, connected to several people in regional sales networks across Texas. She almost moved on. Then she looked at the mutual connections. One of them was Daniel Carter. She sat very still. They were connected on LinkedIn, which meant at some point Daniel had accepted a connection request from this man or sent one. It meant they knew each other. It meant this was not a random name on a filing. This was someone Daniel had a relationship with. She wrote, "Daniel knows James Whitfield, connected on LinkedIn, find out how." She kept searching. By 7:30 that morning, she had found enough to know that James Whitfield worked in the same regional sales circuit as Daniel. They had both attended an industry conference in San Antonio 2 years ago. She found a group photo from that conference on a professional association's website, 20 or so people in business, casual standing in a hotel lobby, smiling at the camera. Daniel was in the back row, and 3 people to his left, also smiling, was a man tagged in the caption as James Whitfield. She stared at that photograph for a long time. 2 years ago, 1 year before the LLC was registered, 1 year before the secret bank account was opened. They had been in the same room 2 years ago, and Daniel had never once mentioned this person's name. She heard Daniel's alarm go off in the bedroom. She closed her laptop halfway, not hiding it, just not displaying it. She heard him moving around. The bathroom, the shower, the ordinary sounds of a man starting his morning, moving through his routine, completely unaware that his wife was sitting 12 feet away, dismantling everything he thought was hidden. He came into the kitchen at 7:52. I was dressed for work. He looked rested, which surprised her. He poured coffee and leaned against the counter and looked at her with that managed expression she had identified the night before, the careful neutrality of a man who was monitoring a situation rather than participating in it. "You're up early," he said. "I'm always up early," she said. He nodded, looked at his coffee. "I was thinking maybe we could have dinner tonight, somewhere nice, talk things through properly." Emily looked at him. "Sure," she said. "That sounds fine." He seemed slightly relieved, which told her that the managed apology from the night before had not felt as solid to him as he'd hoped, and he was still working to reestablish ground. "I was thinking Carmine's," he said. Carmine's was a restaurant they had been to twice, both times for significant occasions. He was signaling effort, investment. "Okay," Emily said. He finished his coffee. He set the mug in the sink. He said, "I'll be home by 7." And she said, "I'll be here." And he walked out the front door. She listened to his car back out of the driveway. She opened her laptop all the way. She texted Sarah. "He suggested dinner tonight. Normal behavior. I'm not confronting him." She sent it before picking up her coffee, and Sarah responded within minutes. "Good. Keep everything normal. Our specialist starts today." Emily read the message. She put the phone down. She looked at the photograph still open on her screen. Daniel in the back row. James Whitfield 3 people to his left. She started digging into the LLC itself, its registered purpose, its filing history, whether it had submitted any income to the state. What she found sent a chill straight through her. The LLC had filed a business activity report 8 months ago showing revenue of $42,000 in its first operating year. $42,000. She read that number 3 times. Then she sat back and did the math that immediately followed. If the LLC had generated $42,000 in its first year, and if the money was being channeled away from their marital estate, then the $14,000 she had found in direct transfers from their joint account was not the full picture. It might not even be close to the full picture. She picked up her phone and called Sarah directly. "The LLC filed activity showing $42,000 in revenue," she said the moment Sarah picked up. A pause, then, "In 1 year, first operating year, I just found the state filing." "Emily." Sarah's voice shifted into something sharper and more focused. "That changes the scope of what we're dealing with significantly. If he has been generating income through a concealed entity and failing to disclose it as marital income, that is not just financial misconduct in a divorce context. That potentially crosses into fraudulent concealment of assets." "Can they find where the money went?" Emily asked. "That's exactly what our specialist is going to look for. I'm calling her right now and moving this to priority." A brief pause. "You said dinner tonight." "He suggested Carmine's." "Go," Sarah said immediately. "Act completely normal. Let him talk. Don't ask about anything you know. And if he brings up the party, let him apologize. Don't accept it aggressively. Don't dismiss it. Just listen." "I can do that," Emily said. "I know you can," Sarah said. And there was something in her voice, not quite warmth, but respect. The respect of one precise person for another. "I'll call you after I speak with the specialist." Emily put the phone down. She thought about $42,000. She thought about Portugal, the trip they kept saying they'd take, the vacation fund they kept adding to, the savings account with the down payment they kept getting close to. She thought about all the things that hadn't happened, and she went back to work. Sarah called back at 11:15. "Our specialist is a woman named Carol Dean," she said. 15 years in forensic accounting, former IRS. She's looked at your summary documents, and she has questions." "Tell her I'll answer anything," Emily said. "She wants to know about the tax returns." Emily had pulled the tax return files from their shared drive already. "We filed jointly every year. Daniel always handled the actual filing. I signed where he pointed." "Did you ever review the returns before signing?" Emily paused. She thought about this carefully, honestly. "He would show me the summary pages, the totals. I didn't go through the line items." A brief silence on Sarah's end that Emily understood immediately. "She needs to see the last 3 years of returns," Sarah said. "Can you get those?" "I have access to the shared drive where he stores documents," Emily said. "I don't know if they're there, but I can look." "Do that now while you still have normal access to everything," Sarah said. "Don't wait." Emily opened the shared drive on her laptop. She navigated through Daniel's folder structure. The man who accused her of managing everything was ironically meticulously organized in his own digital files. She found the tax folder. She found 3 years of returns, each neatly labeled. She downloaded all 3. She sent them to Sarah's encrypted email address. 20 minutes later, Sarah called again. "Carol found something," she said, and her voice was different now, quieter, more careful. The voice of someone delivering news they know will land hard. "Tell me," Emily said. "On last year's return there is income listed from freelance consulting work, $12,000. Did you know Daniel did any freelance consulting?" "No," Emily said. "Never. He works exclusively for his company. His contract prohibits independent consulting." "That's what Carol suspected," Sarah said. "The $12,000 is consistent with income routed through the LLC. But here's the issue. It was reported as miscellaneous income, which means it was disclosed to the IRS, but it was reported at a level that suggests not all of the LLC's revenue was declared on the joint return." Emily processed this carefully. "So some of the $42,000 was hidden." "It appears so. Carol needs more time to trace it fully. But Emily, what this looks like, and I want to be clear, this is preliminary, is that your husband has been operating a secondary income stream, reporting a fraction of it on your joint taxes to avoid suspicion and funneling the remainder somewhere else." "Somewhere else," Emily repeated. "We think the hidden account is a clearing account," Sarah said. "Money comes in from the LLC, a portion gets reported. The rest goes somewhere we haven't traced yet." Emily sat with that for a moment. "How much money are we potentially talking about?" she asked. "Carol thinks the full undisclosed amount over 18 months could be between $40,000 and $60,000, Sarah said. "Possibly more." Emily closed her eyes, not because she was overwhelmed, because she needed 1 single second of absolute stillness before she moved forward. 1 second. Then she opened her eyes. "What do I need to do next?" she said. Sarah's answer was precise and thorough, and Emily wrote every word of it down. That afternoon, Margaret called. Emily had been expecting this call, though she hadn't known exactly when it would come. Margaret had texted 3 times since the party, gentle, careful texts that asked how Emily was doing without pushing that offered presence without demand. This was the first time she was calling directly. Emily answered on the second ring. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Margaret said. "You're not," Emily said. "I'm glad you called." A brief silence. Then Margaret said, "I owe you an honest conversation." Emily didn't say anything. She waited. "I've been watching something happen for about 2 years," Margaret said slowly. Her voice was measured, but underneath the measure there was something effortful, the effort of a person choosing truth over comfort. "I've seen Daniel change, the way he talks about his life, the way he talks about you, the impatience in him, the I don't know how to say this kindly, so I'll just say it plainly, the contempt." Emily felt the word land. Contempt. She had felt it for months, but had not named it even to herself. "I should have said something to you before now," Margaret continued. "I kept telling myself it wasn't my place, that marriages have their seasons, that I didn't know the whole picture." She paused. "The truth is I was afraid of what it would mean, afraid of what I might have to acknowledge about my son." "You don't have to," Emily started. "Let me finish," Margaret said gently but firmly. "The night of the party, when he walked you to that door, when he put his hand on you like that in front of those people, I sat at that table, and I felt something I have not felt in 30 years. Her voice tightened. "I felt like I was watching myself." Emily went very still. "My husband," Margaret said, "Daniel's father, he could be like that, in front of people, that particular kind of humiliation that is performed, that is deliberate." She exhaled slowly. "I stayed. For too many years I stayed, and I told myself it wasn't that bad, and it didn't mean what it looked like. And by the time I understood clearly what it meant, I had lost a decade I cannot get back." The line was quiet. Emily felt something move through her that was not quite grief and not quite gratitude, something in between, the recognition of a hand reaching through the years from one woman's life to another's. "I'm not going to make the same mistake you did," Emily said quietly. "I know," Margaret said. "That's why I'm telling you." A pause. "Is there anything I can do?" Emily thought about this carefully. "Not yet," she said, "but there might be soon. When the time comes, I may need someone who saw what happened at that party. Who was there?" Margaret understood immediately. "I was there," she said. "I saw everything, and I will say so, anywhere you need me to." "Thank you, Margaret." "Don't thank me," the older woman said, and her voice cracked just slightly at its edge. Just don't disappear on me after this is over. You have been a better daughter-in-law than my son deserved. I'd like to keep you in my life if that's possible." Emily pressed her hand flat against her sternum. "I'd like that too," she said. After she hung up, she sat for a long time without moving. She thought about Daniel's father, about Margaret at a dinner table 30 years ago, being humiliated the same way Emily had been humiliated 5 days ago, about patterns that move through families like water finding the path of least resistance. She thought about the hand on her wrist at the party, hard enough to leave a mark. She had not mentioned that to Sarah yet. She picked up her phone and texted Sarah. "One more thing. He grabbed my wrist at the party. Hard. In front of witnesses, including his mother." Sarah responded in under a minute. "That matters. Don't wash the dress if you still have it." Emily looked up. She walked to the bedroom closet. She found the dress she had worn to the party still on the hanger where she had left it that night, too tired and too focused to think about laundry. She looked at the fabric near the right wrist. There was a faint pulling in the weave where the grip had twisted. She photographed it from 3 angles. She put it back on the hanger. She sent the photographs to Sarah. Then she went to get ready for dinner. Carmine's was exactly what Daniel intended it to be, an effort. The kind of restaurant that said, "I am taking this seriously." White tablecloths, low lighting, a wine list that required a decision. Daniel had made a reservation. He was already seated when Emily arrived, which was not typical. Usually she arrived first, and she understood the calculation in it. He wanted to be seen as the one waiting, the one who made the effort, the one already there. She sat down across from him and smiled the same neutral smile she had been maintaining for 4 days now, and she looked at the menu and she ordered the salmon and she waited. He talked about work for 10 minutes, projects quote as a difficult client in San Marcos. She listened and asked appropriate questions and watched his face and said nothing that mattered. Then he set his fork down and looked at her directly. "I've been thinking a lot about the party," he said. "Okay," she said. "I handled it badly, I know that." "You do," she said. "I was there were things going on that I wasn't handling well, with work, with just personally, and I took it out on you in a way that was completely unfair." Emily put a small amount of salmon on her fork and chewed it slowly and swallowed. "What kind of personal things?" she asked. A flicker, almost invisible, the micro-expression of a man deciding in real time how much to reveal. "Just stress," he said. "I've been under a lot of pressure. From work. Partly work. Partly I've been questioning some things." She looked at him. "What kinds of things?" He reached for his wine, took a drink. "About where I am, what I want, whether I've made the choices that are right for me." Emily set her fork down very gently. "Are you questioning our marriage, Daniel?" He looked at his plate, and in that look, in the 2 seconds he spent examining his risotto, rather than meeting her eyes, she had her answer. Whatever came out of his mouth next was already beside the point. "I think we've grown apart," he said. "Over the last couple of years, I think we want different things." "What do you want?" she asked. "Something different," he said. And then almost immediately, "I don't mean to hurt you." Emily looked at her husband, at the man across this carefully chosen table, at this carefully chosen restaurant, performing a confession that he had clearly rehearsed, delivering it with the same managed tone he used for everything, calibrated, controlled, designed to minimize her reaction while maximizing his freedom. She thought about $42,000. She thought about James Whitfield. She thought about the hotel charge on the same week as the conference. She thought about the message he had written, handle the Emily situation, which she still hadn't found yet, which was still coming, which she would find in 48 hours in a way she could not yet predict. She thought about all the things she knew that he didn't know she knew, and she made a choice, the same choice she had made every day this week, to hold what she had, to say nothing she didn't need to say yet, to let him believe he was the one directing this conversation. "I appreciate you telling me," she said, her voice even and quiet. "I think we both need some time to think." He looked slightly surprised. He had expected more. Tears, maybe. Protests. The kind of reaction that would allow him to cast himself as the reasonable one. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think that's right." "I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days," Emily said. "Give us both some space." "Okay," he said. He looked almost relieved. "I think that's probably a good idea." She picked her fork back up. She finished her salmon. She did not cry. She did not tell him that there was no friend. that she was going to stay in a hotel room she had already booked that afternoon under her own name, with her own card, close enough to be in Austin, but far enough to work without interruption. That she would spend those days coordinating with Sarah and Carol and preparing for what was coming. She did not tell him any of that. She ordered dessert. She let him pay the bill. She drove to the hotel. The hotel room was plain and clean and entirely hers. She set up her laptop on the small desk, plugged in her phone charger, laid out her notebooks, and felt something she had not felt since before the party relief. The relief of a space no one else was occupying. No management, no monitoring, no calibrated neutrality. She ordered room service and ate it at the desk and went back to work. Carol Dean called at 9:15. "I've been through all 3 tax returns," Carol said. She had a direct, unhurried voice, the voice of someone who has spent 15 years looking at numbers that people tried to hide and has developed an absolute immunity to shock. "I want to walk you through what I found." "Go ahead," Emily said. "Your husband has been filing as a consultant on Schedule C for 2 tax years. Year 1, he reported $12,000. Year 2, he reported $9,000. Combined, that's $21,000 in declared consulting income over 2 years. But the LLC showed $42,000 in its first year alone," Emily said. "Correct, which means approximately $21,000 in LLC revenue was not declared on your joint return in year 1. In year 2, I'm seeing similar patterns, but the LLC records from the state are incomplete. I'm working with what we have from the filings you sent and what I've been able to pull from public records." "So the undisclosed income over 2 years is potentially over $40,000, Emily said. "At minimum," Carol said. "Possibly significantly more depending on what the complete LLC records show." A brief pause. "Emily, I need to ask you something directly, and I want you to answer as honestly as you can." "Of course." "Did you ever sign any documents related to a business entity? Any LLC operating agreements? Any consulting contracts? Anything that might have your signature on it that you didn't fully read at the time?" Emily thought back, carefully, trying to retrieve every moment from the past 2 years when Daniel had placed something in front of her and asked her to sign. There had been the refinancing paperwork on the house, the updated insurance documents, the investment account rebalancing authorization she had signed last spring. "There was a document last spring," she said slowly. "He said it was for the investment account, to authorize a rebalancing strategy. I signed it." Silence on Carol's end. "Did you get a copy?" Carol asked. "He said he'd put it in the shared drive," Emily said. She was already opening the drive on her laptop. She went to the investment folder. She searched for documents from last spring. "I see a document from March, rebalancing authorization. But there's a second document from the same day that I don't remember signing." Her chest tightened. She opened it. It was an operating agreement for the LLC, with her signature at the bottom. She stared at it for 10 full seconds. "Carol," she said. Her voice was completely controlled. "He had me sign the LLC operating agreement. I thought I was signing investment paperwork." The silence on Carol's end lasted 3 seconds. "Emily," Carol said, "I need you to forward that document to Sarah immediately, right now before anything else." Emily's hands were already moving. She attached the document and sent it to Sarah in under a minute. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the specific adrenaline of someone who has just found the thing they were looking for without knowing they were looking for it. "Sent," she said. "Good," Carol said. "That document is significant. If your signature was obtained under false pretenses, if he represented it as something other than what it was, that's fraud. That is not a gray area." Emily pressed her hand flat on the desk. She thought about Daniel in March. He had come home with a folder of papers. He had said something about the investment manager wanting to restructure their portfolio allocation. He had sat beside her on the couch and opened the folder and pointed to the lines where she needed to sign, and she had signed them because they were a team, and she trusted him. And there were 4 pages of fine print that she had looked at and not read, because why would she read them when he was right there telling her what they were? The same reason she had never deeply reviewed the tax returns before signing, because they were a team, because she trusted him. She pressed her palm harder against the desk. "I signed an LLC operating agreement thinking it was investment paperwork," she said, not to Carol, to herself, to the woman she had been 8 months ago, sitting on that couch, not reading what was in front of her. "Sarah will know exactly what to do with this," Carol said. "You did the right thing finding it." Emily exhaled slowly. "What else is there?" she asked. Carol told her. For the next 35 minutes, Carol walked her through every thread she had pulled from the tax returns and the financial records and the business filing data. By the end of the call, Emily had 7 pages of notes and the understanding that what she had uncovered was not just an affair and not just hidden spending money. It was a systematic, deliberate, multi-year financial architecture built in secret, while Emily was busy being the person who managed everything visible. He had built something underneath their marriage, a whole separate infrastructure running parallel to the life she thought they shared, designed to give him a place to go when he decided he was done. And he had used her signature to build part of it. She sat in the hotel room for a long time after Carol hung up. She thought about the birthday party. She thought about Daniel's face when he told her to leave, the certainty in it, the absence of guilt. He had been planning this exit for 18 months. The party, the humiliation, the managed apology at dinner, none of it was reactive. It was a sequence. He had already decided. He had already built his exit. The party was just where he had decided to begin the execution, because he believed that Emily Quiet, capable, invisible Emily, the woman who managed everything without complaint, would simply absorb the humiliation and recede. He had forgotten what kind of woman she was. He had spent 10 years watching her manage impossible things without breaking, and he had concluded that she would never break, and he had mistaken that for weakness, instead of understanding it for what it was. The specific, absolute, unbreakable competence of a woman who had never once in her life left something unfinished. Emily looked at her 7 pages of notes. She looked at the document folder on her laptop. She thought about this message she still hadn't found, the one that existed somewhere in a phone she hadn't accessed in an account. She didn't have the password to, yet the message where her husband had written that after the birthday party, he would handle the Emily situation. She didn't know about it yet. But she would, because she was not done. She had never, not once, been the kind of woman who left anything unfinished. She opened a new page in her notebook. She wrote 3 words at the top, "What comes next?" And then she picked up her pen and she answered her own question line by careful line until the hotel room was quiet and the city outside had gone dark, and she had mapped everything that needed to happen before she walked into that final room and laid the whole truth on the table. She wrote until her hand ached. She didn't stop. Part 4. The truth laid on the table. She slept 4 hours that night. Not because she couldn't sleep more, but because her mind came back online at 5:15 with the particular sharpness of a person who has been solving a problem even while unconscious. She lay still for exactly 3 minutes, organizing what she knew, and then she got up, made the hotel room's thin coffee, and sat at the desk with her notebook. It was day 6 since the birthday party. 6 days since Daniel had gripped her wrist and told her to get out. In those 6 days, Emily had found a hidden bank account, a concealed LLC, $14,000 in direct transfers, potentially $60,000 in undisclosed income, a fraudulently obtained signature on a business operating agreement, and a forensic accountant who believed the full financial picture was larger than anything Emily had yet uncovered. What she did not have yet was the message. She had known it existed for 3 days now. Sarah had mentioned it obliquely during their second meeting, had said that in cases like this, there was often digital correspondence that clarified intent, and that if Emily had any access to Daniel's devices or accounts, now was the time to think carefully about what was legally available to her. Emily had thought about this. She and Daniel shared a family cloud account, the kind that automatically backed up both their phones to a shared storage that Emily had set up years ago, because she was the one who managed things like cloud backups and storage limits and software updates. The family account was hers. She had set it up. She paid for the subscription. She had not looked at what was in it because she had spent 6 years not looking at things that were not her business, because that was what trust looked like. She opened the family account on her laptop. She navigated to the backup files. She found Daniel's phone backup from 3 days ago, the day after the birthday party. She sat with her hand on the trackpad for a long moment. Then she opened it. The messages loaded slowly. There were hundreds of them. She didn't look at the ones from his colleagues or his buddies or his mother. She went directly to the thread with Rachel Morgan, and she started reading. It took her 11 minutes to read through 4 months of messages between her husband and the young woman in the bright dress. She read them with the same systematic focus she brought to everything, not skimming, not jumping ahead, reading every word, because the details mattered and she was not going to miss anything. The early messages were careful, professional at the edges but warmer underneath, the kind of messages that could be explained away if seen in isolation. A recommendation for a restaurant, a comment about a conference call, a joke about a difficult client. Then they shifted. The shift happened gradually, and then all at once the way things always do. By month 2, Daniel was telling Rachel things he had not told Emily in years. How he felt about his career, what he wanted his life to look like, the version of himself he believed he was becoming. He wrote to Rachel with a looseness and an honesty that Emily recognized immediately, not because he had ever written to her that way, but because she had spent 10 years watching him be carefully guarded, and now she was seeing what he looked like without the guard up. It hurt in the specific, quiet way that truth hurts when it confirms what you already suspected. She kept reading. By month 3, Rachel was responding with the kind of warmth that comes from someone who believes she is receiving something rare. She wrote that she had never met someone who understood her the way Daniel did. She wrote that she had never expected to feel this way. Emily read these messages with a detachment she surprised herself with because what she was feeling was not jealousy. What she was feeling was something more like the specific grief of watching a person you loved perform their best self for someone else. Then she hit month 4, 3 weeks before the birthday party. Daniel had written, "The party is next month. I've been thinking about it a lot. Emily is going to make it into this whole production like she always does, and I'm going to have to stand there and smile through it. I'm so done with the performance of all of this." Rachel had responded, "Then stop performing. You know what you want." Daniel had written back, "I know. After the party, I'm going to handle the Emily situation. I've already talked to James about the next phase. Everything is set up. I just need to get through this last thing." Emily stopped. She read those 3 sentences again. Handle the Emily situation. I've already talked to James about the next phase. Everything is set up. She set her coffee mug down on the desk very carefully because her hands had started to shake. Not the gentle tremor of emotion, but the deep physical tremor of adrenaline. The kind that comes when your body understands something before your mind has finished processing it. He had planned it, not reacted to it, not made a decision in the moment at the party. Planned it. 3 weeks in advance, he had already spoken to James Whitfield about the next phase, the LLC, the hidden account, the exit strategy that had been running parallel to their marriage for 18 months. He had told Rachel that everything was set up, that the party was just the last thing he had to get through. She was not a wife he was losing patience with. She was a situation he was managing toward resolution. She picked up her phone and called Sarah. It was 5:47 in the morning. Sarah answered on the second ring, which meant Sarah had been awake, which meant Sarah was the kind of attorney who did not sleep easily when a case was moving. "I found the messages," Emily said. A short silence. "Tell me." Emily read the 3 sentences aloud. Verbatim. Handle the Emily situation. I've already talked to James about the next phase. Everything is set up. The silence that followed was 5 full seconds. "Emily," Sarah said, "that message is potentially the most important thing you have found." "Because it shows intent," Emily said. "Because it shows premeditation," Sarah corrected. "It establishes that the financial concealment was not impulsive or opportunistic. It establishes that he had a deliberate plan, that it involved a named third party, James Whitfield, who is already on our radar, and that the public humiliation at the party was part of the execution of that plan." A pause. "Can you screenshot everything and send it to me encrypted right now?" "I'm doing it as we speak," Emily said. She screenshotted every message from the Rachel thread, organized them chronologically, and sent the entire package to Sarah's encrypted address while still on the phone. 22 screenshots. 4 months of her husband's secret life compressed into a file she sent across the internet at 5:50 in the morning from a hotel room while Daniel Carter slept in their shared house 12 minutes away, still believing he was in control of the situation. "I have them," Sarah said. "I'm going to call Carol as soon as it's a reasonable hour, and I'm going to need to meet with you today." "I'll be there," Emily said. "How are you holding up?" Emily looked at the screenshot still open on her laptop, at the words, "Handle the Emily situation," glowing on the screen. "I'm fine," she said. "Emily." "I mean it," she said. And she did, because what she was feeling was not devastation. It was the specific cold clarity of a person who has been carrying a weight they didn't know the full shape of and has finally picked it up completely and found that, terrible as it is something they can hold. She knew now. She knew all of it, or close enough to all of it, that the remaining gaps were details, not structure. And knowing was better than not knowing. It was always better than not knowing. "I'll see you at 10, she said. She put the phone down. She looked at the message on the screen one more time. Then she closed the laptop, got in the shower, and got ready for the most important day of the past 6 years of her marriage. Sarah's office at 10 in the morning had a different energy than it had 6 days ago. The first time Emily had walked in, Sarah had been professional and careful, feeling out the situation, assessing what she was working with, both the case and the client. Now, when Emily came through the door and sat across from the desk, Sarah was already leaning forward, already focused, already in the mode of someone who has been thinking about a problem all morning and is ready to move. Carol Dean was there too, in person for the first time. A woman in her early 50s, compact and unreadable with reading glasses, pushed up on her head, and a tablet full of spreadsheets in front of her. She shook Emily's hand with a grip that communicated she had seen worse things than this and survived all of them. "Let's go through what we have," Sarah said. They spent 90 minutes going through it. Carol laid out the financial picture in the kind of organized, precise language that Emily found genuinely comforting, because numbers meant things, and what Carol was presenting was a case constructed from facts rather than feelings. The LLC revenue, the undisclosed income, the transfers, the hidden account, the fraudulently obtained signature, the total estimated amount of marital assets that had been deliberately concealed, somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000, with the strong possibility of more that hadn't yet been traced. When Carol finished, she folded her hands and looked at Emily directly. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Go ahead," Emily said. "Do you have any reason to believe that Daniel's employer is aware of the consulting LLC?" Emily thought about this. His employment contract prohibits independent consulting in the same industry. "I know that because he mentioned it once he was complaining about a restriction that he called unnecessary." Carol and Sarah exchanged a look. "His company's legal team would be very interested in an LLC operating in the same regional sales market as his employer," Sarah said carefully. "That's not something we would approach directly, but it's something we need to be aware of as this proceeds." Emily understood. "He could lose his job. He may already be in violation of his employment contract," Carol said. "That's between him and his employer, but it affects the financial calculations significantly because his income is a major component of what the court will consider an asset division." Emily sat with this for a moment, not savoring it, just understanding the weight of it. The architecture Daniel had built to protect his future was going to be the thing that damaged it most severely. "What about Rachel Morgan?" Emily asked. Sarah paused. "What about her?" "She knew," Emily said. "Not everything I don't think she knew about the financial structure. But she knew he was married, she knew he was planning to leave, and she was actively encouraging it. The message where she said, 'Stop performing, you know what you want,' she knew what she was participating in." "She did," Sarah said carefully. "Whether that's legally relevant depends on several factors. What I can tell you is that in a divorce proceeding, her existence and the documented nature of the relationship will be highly relevant to the question of marital fault, which in Texas can affect the distribution of assets." Emily nodded. "The message where he says, 'Handle the Emily situation,'" Sarah continued. "Combined with the physical incident at the party, the wrist and Margaret as a witness, we have a picture of a man who did not simply have an affair. We have a man who made a deliberate decision to degrade and discard his wife in a public setting as part of a planned exit that had been orchestrated over 18 months. She paused. "Judges respond to patterns, and we have a very clear pattern." Emily looked at her hands. She thought about something she had been turning over since the night before, something she needed to say out loud. "I don't want to destroy him," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing this because 10 years of my life went into that marriage, and I have a right to what I built, and I have a right to the truth." She looked up. "But I don't want to spend the next year of my life trying to hurt him." Sarah studied her for a moment. "What do you want?" "A fair accounting," Emily said. "Everything that's mine, including what he moved away from both of us. And I want to be done cleanly, as quickly as it can be done properly." "Then that's what we work toward," Sarah said. But Emily, the fair accounting you're describing, given what Carol has documented, is not going to be a small thing. He is going to fight this." "I know," Emily said. "He's going to be blindsided," Carol added. "People always think they've hidden things better than they have. When he sees what we've put together, he's going to panic, and panicked people make mistakes." "Let him," Emily said. Sarah almost smiled. They spent the next 30 minutes planning the approach, the filing, the financial disclosures that would be required, the subpoenas that would pull the LLC records fully into the open. The approach to Daniel's employer not by them, but through a carefully constructed sequence that Sarah explained with the precision of someone who had done this before and understood exactly which domino needed to fall first. By noon, Emily walked out of Sarah's office with a clear sequence of steps and a filing date set for the following week. She sat in her car for a moment. She called Margaret. "Are you available this evening?" she asked when Margaret answered. "For you? Yes, always," Margaret said immediately. "What do you need?" "Daniel has suggested we meet," Emily said. "He doesn't know I've spoken to you, and he doesn't know what I know. He wants to sit down with his mother, and I think his word was reconcile. He believes this dinner is going to go the way he's decided it's going to go." A long pause on Margaret's end. "And you want me there," Margaret said slowly. "I want you there," Emily said. "Not as a weapon, not to ambush him, but because you saw what happened at that party, and because you told me you recognize the pattern, and because Daniel needs to understand that the people who have been watching him are not going to pretend they haven't seen what they've seen." Margaret was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was very steady. "When and where?" "Saturday evening," Emily said. "Our house, 7 o'clock. I'll cook." "I'll be there," Margaret said. Emily started the car. She had 3 days. Those 3 days were the most deliberately quiet days of Emily's adult life. She returned home from the hotel on Thursday morning while Daniel was at work. She moved through the house the way you move through a place you are memorizing, not frantically, not with visible purpose, but with the attentiveness of someone recording something they know they will not see again in the same way. She cooked dinner Thursday night, something simple. She and Daniel ate mostly in silence, which had become the default register of their household, and Daniel made small efforts asking about her day, commenting on the food, and she received them neutrally and offered nothing that wasn't asked for. He seemed to believe the dinner at Carmine's had stabilized things, that she had accepted that we've grown apart and was processing it in the quiet, managed way she did everything. He did not know that the processing she was doing was of an entirely different order than anything he had imagined. Friday morning she called her friend Diane, one of 3 women she had trusted genuinely over the years of her marriage, one of the few people who knew Emily Carter, not as Daniel Carter's wife, but as the woman she had been before and alongside and underneath that role. Diane was 51 and had lived through her own divorce 11 years ago, and when Emily told her, not everything but enough, there was a silence on the line followed by the kind of response that only comes from a person who has sat in the same fire. "You are the most competent human being I have ever known," Diane said, "and that man has been treating you like furniture for years. I have been watching it happen, and I didn't say enough, and I'm sorry." "You couldn't have said it before I was ready to hear it," Emily said. "Are you really okay?" Emily thought about this honestly. "I am," she said. "Not in a performance way, in an actual way. I feel like I've been walking around in a house with one room I was never allowed to open, and now the door is open and it's terrible in there, but at least I can finally see it." Diane laughed quietly, the way people laugh when something is precisely true. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing right now," Emily said. "But after Saturday I might need someone to just sit with me for a while." "I'll be there," Diane said. "I'm bringing wine." Emily almost laughed. "Okay," she said. "Yes." Friday evening she prepared. She reviewed her folder one more time, not because she had forgotten anything, but because she needed to feel the weight of it in her hands. Every document, every screenshot, every notation Carol had made on the financial analysis printouts, every piece of evidence that represented the truth of the past 18 months of her marriage. She organized it the way she organized everything chronologically, clearly labeled easy to follow. And then she cooked for Saturday's dinner. She made Daniel's mother's favorite dish, a thing she had learned from Margaret years ago, early in the marriage, when Margaret had shown her in her own kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, and they had stood side by side and talked about nothing consequential, and Emily had thought with genuine warmth, "I am lucky to have her." She still thought so. She was still lucky. just not in the ways she had imagined. Saturday arrived. Daniel had confirmed the dinner himself, which told her he had been looking forward to it for reasons of his own. She suspected he believed a dinner with his mother present would provide a kind of social scaffolding, that having Margaret there would moderate Emily's behavior, keep things calm, allow him to move the conversation toward the ending he had already written. He had been doing this for years without knowing it, using social situations as regulation mechanisms, relying on Emily's instinct to maintain composure in front of others, as a way to keep her from saying things he didn't want said. He had miscalculated what Emily was capable of maintaining. At 6:30, Emily set the table. She placed the folder of documents at her own seat. Daniel came down at 6:45 and saw the folder on the table. He looked at it for a moment, then at Emily. "What's that?" he asked. "We can talk when your mother gets here," she said. He said nothing. He went to get a drink of water, and Emily watched him from the kitchen and saw in the set of his shoulders the first real flicker of something that was not managed confidence, something lower, something animal. He was starting to sense it, the way prey senses a change in the air. Margaret arrived at 7 on the dot, because Margaret was always on time, and Emily opened the door and they looked at each other for a moment, just a moment, and what passed between them was not words but complete understanding. The understanding of two women who have both seen the same thing clearly and are now prepared to say so. "Come in," Emily said. They sat at the table. Emily brought the food out. They went through the first minutes of a dinner serving, commenting the ordinary choreography of people sitting together, and Daniel was monitoring everything. Emily could feel it watching both women with the careful attention of someone who knows the temperature has changed but hasn't yet located the source. Then Emily set her fork down. She put her hand on the folder, and she said, "I'd like to talk about some things, if that's okay with both of you." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Emily." "Let her speak," Margaret said, quiet and absolute. Daniel looked at his mother, and something crossed his face that Emily had not seen there before, the specific discomfort of a man who has always been able to rely on his mother's instinct to protect him, finding that the protection is not coming tonight. Emily opened the folder. She placed the first document on the table, the bank transfer record showing $14,000 moved to the hidden account. She said what it was, and when it had started, and what the account was connected to. Her voice was steady and clear, and she spoke the way Carol Dean spoke in facts, in amounts and dates. Daniel opened his mouth. "I'm not done," Emily said, not loudly, firmly. She placed the second document, the LLC business filing. She explained what it was when it was registered, who the secondary officer was. Daniel went very still. She placed the third document, the tax returns with Carol's annotations highlighting the discrepancies between declared consulting income and the LLC's reported revenue. Daniel said, "Emily, I can explain. The LLC showed $42,000 in revenue in its first year," Emily said. "21,000 was declared on our joint taxes. The remaining 21,000 was not." She looked at him. "Where did it go, Daniel?" He said nothing. She placed the fourth document, the hotel charge paired with the restaurant charge from the February conference week. She said the name of the conference hotel. She said the name of the other hotel. She said the amounts. She said the dates. She placed the fifth document, the LLC operating agreement, with her signature. She watched his face when he saw it. She watched the color shift in his skin, the way his eyes moved from the paper to her face and back again. "You told me that was investment paperwork," she said. "Emily," he said. His voice had lost its management. What was underneath was something rawer and less controlled. "You don't understand what you're—" "I understand exactly what it is," she said. "My attorney explained it very clearly." She let that land. Let him process that she had an attorney. Let him understand that this was not a confrontation assembled in anger, that this had been built carefully with professional support over the course of a week. It is a fraudulently obtained signature on a business operating agreement that has legal implications that go beyond our divorce. The word divorce sat on the table between them like something physical. Margaret was very still across it from her son. Her hands were folded in front of her and her face was composed, and she did not look away from him. "Daniel," Margaret said. He turned to look at his mother. "I need to tell you something," Margaret said, "and I need you to hear me." Her voice was not loud. It was the voice of someone who has been quiet for a very long time and has finally decided that the silence has cost too much. "I have been watching you for 2 years. The way you talk about Emily when she's not in the room, the way you look at her when she is, the way you managed that party, the way you had your hand on her wrist. Her voice stayed even, but it cost her. Emily could hear it costing her. Your father did that, to me, in front of people. He used humiliation like a tool, and he called it managing situations, and I spent 15 years calling it something else because I could not bear to see it clearly. Daniel stared at his mother. I see it clearly now, Margaret said, and I will not sit in this room and pretend that what you have done to this woman, what you have been doing, is something I don't recognize. Mom, I love you, Margaret said. You are my son, and I love you without condition. But I will not be in this room pretending. She looked at Emily. I saw everything at that party. I will say so in any forum where it is relevant. Daniel's face had done something complicated during his mother's speech. Emily had watched it move through several different expressions: defensiveness, disbelief, a flash of something that looked almost like a child-specific hurt when a parent refuses to cover for them and lands somewhere she hadn't quite seen on him before. It landed on shame. Real shame, not the performed apology of the dinner at Carmine's, something underneath the performance, something that looked for the first time in this entire week like a man who was actually seeing himself. I didn't plan to hurt you, he said, and his voice was different, smaller, more real. I know, Emily said. You planned to leave. You planned the financial structure and the exit and the narrative. You planned everything except the part where I wasn't going to absorb it quietly. He looked at the folder of documents on the table. What happens now, he said. My attorney files next week, Emily said. The financial disclosures will be required under discovery. The LLC records will be subpoenaed. Carol Dean, she's a forensic accountant. She was with the IRS for 15 years. She's already been through 3 years of our tax returns, and she is thorough. She paused. And Daniel, your employment contract. She watched him understand what she meant. She watched it move across his face in real time. The sudden specific comprehension that the LLC and its industry overlap with his employer's territory was not something that had gone unnoticed, that the documents once subpoenaed would be available, that his employer's legal team would have access to information about an independent consulting operation running in direct competition with the restrictions of his employment agreement. Emily, he said, and now there was something in his voice she had almost never heard from him. Not management, not performance, something close to fear. Emily, if that comes out, I know, she said, I could lose my position. I know, she said again. I wasn't trying to. He stopped. He put his hands on the table. He looked at them. He looked like a man watching something he built for a long time collapse in the space of a single evening, understanding that the collapse is not coming from outside, but from the weight of what he put inside it. Emily waited. When he looked up, his eyes were red at the edges. Not crying, close to it. I don't know how we got here, he said. Emily looked at him for a long moment. I do, she said. You started believing that the life I built around you was something you deserved instead of something you were given. And when you wanted something different, instead of talking to me, instead of being honest, you started building a door out, secretly, using money that was ours, and a signature you got from me under false pretenses, and a plan you described to another woman as handling the Emily situation. He flinched. That's how we got here, she said. Margaret reached across the table and covered Emily's hand with hers. Emily felt the warmth of it. She did not look away from Daniel. I want a fair and complete accounting, she said. I want what is mine. I want a divorce that reflects the full truth of what our finances contained, and I want it done properly, and I want it done soon. She paused. If you cooperate with the full financial disclosure, if you don't fight the numbers, Carol has documented this can move quickly and cleanly. If you fight it, it becomes a very long and very public process. And Daniel, she looked at him steadily. I have everything. I have the messages. He closed his eyes. I know you told Rachel you were going to handle me like a situation, Emily said quietly. I know you told her everything was set up with James. I know the plan, all of it. She gave him a moment to absorb this. There is nothing left to hide. The only decision you have now is how you want to proceed from here. The table was silent. Outside the neighborhood was its usual quiet Saturday evening self. A dog barking somewhere, a car passing. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary suburb on an ordinary night, framing a conversation that would rearrange the rest of their lives. Daniel opened his eyes. He looked at his mother. Margaret looked back at him without rescue. He looked at his wife. Emily looked back at him without anger. Just clarity. Just the steady, unambiguous clarity of a woman who has found every thread and followed it to its end and is now sitting at a table with the whole truth laid out in a folder in front of her, waiting for the person across from her to decide whether he is going to face it honestly or make everything worse. "Okay," Daniel said. His voice was almost inaudible. "Okay," he said again, slightly louder, like a man testing whether the word was solid. I'll call my attorney Monday. I'll tell them to cooperate with full disclosure." Emily nodded once. "Thank you," she said, and then she picked up her fork. She said, "The food is getting cold. Let's eat." Margaret made a sound that might have been a laugh and might have been something else entirely. Daniel looked at his plate. He picked up his fork. They ate. It was the last dinner Emily Carter would ever cook in that house. She didn't know that yet. But somehow, sitting there at that table with the folder of truths open at her elbow, and Margaret's hand still warm from having covered hers, she felt something she had not expected to feel on the other side of the hardest week of her life. She felt free, not happy, not relieved, not triumphant, just free. Like a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has finally carefully, deliberately set it down, and felt for the first time in years exactly how strong she actually was. Part 5. The Woman Who Built a Life Nobody Could Take Away. Daniel kept his word. That surprised her a little. Not because she had expected him to be dishonest, she had expected him to be strategic, which is different, but because she had prepared for a fight, and the fight didn't fully materialize in the way she had steeled herself for. He called his attorney Monday morning as he said he would. His attorney called Sarah by noon. By Wednesday of that week, the framework for full financial disclosure had been agreed upon in principle, and Sarah called Emily with the kind of measured optimism that experienced attorneys deploy carefully because they have seen too many agreements collapse to celebrate prematurely. "He's cooperating," Sarah said. "For now. His attorney knows what we have, and I think they've advised him clearly about what happens if he doesn't." "The employment contract," Emily said. "That was the turning point," Sarah confirmed. Once he understood that the LLC documentation, if fully litigated, would be visible to his employer's legal team, the calculus changed. He has more to lose by fighting than by settling. Emily sat with this. She had not gone into that Saturday dinner intending to use Daniel's job as leverage. She had gone in intending to lay out the truth. But the truth had its own leverage built into it, and she had simply been the one to carry it into the room. "What does the timeline look like?" she asked. "If he maintains full cooperation and the financial disclosures come in clean, meaning consistent with what Carol has already documented, we could have a signed settlement agreement within 60 days, possibly less." 60 days. Emily had spent 10 years building her marriage. She was going to dismantle it in 60 days. She felt something about that. Not grief exactly, something more like the feeling of finishing a very long book, the particular mix of completion and loss that comes when something you've been inside for a long time finally closes. "Let's move as quickly as we can," she said. "I'll push for it," Sarah said. Emily put the phone down and looked at the room around her. She was back in the house she had returned from the hotel the morning after the Saturday dinner because the house was hers too, and she was not going to vacate it, and Daniel had quietly moved into the guest room without discussion, which was the first genuinely graceful thing he had done in as long as she could remember. She looked at the walls, at the photographs she had chosen, at the furniture she had arranged, at the kitchen she had cooked 10,000 meals in, at the 10 years of careful, competent, invisible labor that had made this house into a home for a man who had been planning his exit for 18 months. She thought, "I built all of this." And then she thought something she had not thought before, something new and slightly frightening in its size. "I can build something else." The financial disclosures came in over the following 2 weeks and confirmed everything Carol had found and then some. The full picture, once the LLC records were subpoenaed and reviewed, showed that Daniel had moved a total of $73,000 through the concealed entity over 18 months. Of that, $21,000 had been partially disclosed on their joint taxes. The remaining $52,000 had been distributed between the hidden bank account, direct payments to James Whitfield for what were described vaguely as consulting fees, and a third account. Emily had not yet located a savings account opened in Daniel's name only at a bank they had never used together, containing just over $31,000. Carol presented these numbers to Emily on a Thursday afternoon with the same flat precision she brought to everything, and when she finished, she folded her hands and said, "In my 15 years of doing this, that is one of the more systematically constructed concealment architectures I have seen in a marriage of this income level." Emily looked at the total, $73,000, built over 18 months while she was planning birthday parties and managing household accounts and trusting the man across the table. "He's good at systems," Emily said quietly. "I'll give him that." Carol almost smiled. "So are you?" she said. "You found most of it in a week." The settlement negotiations took 4 weeks rather than 60 days. Daniel's attorney pushed back on 2 points, the valuation of the hidden savings account and the attribution of the LLC revenue as marital income. And Sarah pushed back harder on both with Carol's documentation as the foundation, and both points resolved in Emily's favor. The final settlement gave Emily the house a cash payment, representing her share of the concealed assets, full ownership of her personal accounts, and a support arrangement that Sarah described as unusually favorable, given the length of the marriage and the documented financial misconduct. Emily signed the settlement agreement on a Tuesday morning at Sarah's office at a small conference table with a window that looked out at a street she had driven past hundreds of times without ever going into the building. When it was done, she sat with the pen still in her hand and felt the particular silence of a very large door closing. Sarah was across the table organizing copies. She looked up at Emily and said, "How do you feel?" Emily thought about the honest answer. "Like I've been running a race for a very long time," she said, "and I just crossed the finish line and I'm not sure yet what to do with my hands." Sarah set the papers down. "Give yourself some time," she said. "You moved through something enormous with extraordinary control. At some point that control is going to relax, and you're going to feel things you've been holding back. That's not weakness. That's just the sequence." Emily nodded. She walked out of Sarah's office into the afternoon and sat in her car for 10 minutes without starting the engine. Then she called Diane. "It's done," she said. Diane made a sound that was equal parts relief and celebration. "Where are you right now?" "Parking garage downtown." "Go home," Diane said. "I'll be there in an hour. I promised wine." Emily almost laughed. "Okay," she said. She started the car. She drove home. That evening, sitting at her own kitchen table with Diane across from her and 2 glasses of wine between them, Emily said something she had been carrying since the night of the party and had not yet said out loud to anyone. "I almost didn't cancel the payments," she said. Diane looked at her. "What do you mean?" "When he told me to leave. When I walked out to the parking lot." Emily turned her wine glass slowly. "I stood there for almost a full minute before I made the calls. I was deciding." "Deciding what?" "Whether to be the person who absorbed it and went home quietly, the way I always had." She paused. "There's a version of that night where I get in the car and drive home and cry and wait for him to call, and when he does I say it's okay because it's easier than the alternative." She looked at the table. "I almost did that." Diane was quiet for a moment. "What made you not—" Emily thought about this carefully, about that minute in the parking lot, about the specific quality of her own stillness as she stood there with the warm night air around her and the sound of music still coming through the walls of the venue. "I thought about the cake," she said, "the 3-tiered cake that was still sitting in there waiting to be cut. And I thought about how I had called that bakery 11 times over 3 months to get every detail exactly right. 11 times. And I thought he told me to leave the room containing the thing I spent 3 months making perfect." She looked up. "And something in me just decided, very quietly, that this was the last time I was going to be treated like I was less important than the room I built." Diane reached across the table and covered Emily's hand with hers. They sat like that for a while. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Inside, the house that Emily had built felt different than it had the week before. Not lighter, it wasn't lighter, it was just different, the way a room feels different when you've rearranged it, and you keep reaching for things where they used to be and finding them somewhere new. "What are you going to do now?" Diane asked. Emily picked up her wine glass. She had been thinking about this for 3 weeks. Not obsessively, not as an escape from the immediate work of the settlement, but as a quiet, parallel consideration running in the background while the foreground demanded her attention. a question she had been turning over like a stone, curious about what was underneath. "I've been thinking about starting a company," she said. Diane raised her eyebrows. "Event planning," Emily said. "I've been doing it informally for 10 years. I'm good at it. I know the vendor relationships in this city. I know how to manage logistics, contracts, budgets, client expectations." She set the glass down. "I planned the most technically flawless event of the year, and the only thing wrong with it was the person it was for." Diane stared at her for a moment. Then she laughed, not unkindly, the laugh of someone who has just heard a truth delivered with perfect precision. "Yes," Diane said. "Absolutely yes. When do you start?" "I already did," Emily said. "Sort of. I've been putting together a business plan, quietly, while everything else was happening." Diane shook her head slowly. "Of course you have," she said. "Emily Carter, in the middle of dismantling her marriage, also started a company." "I had to do something with the early mornings," Emily said simply, and this time they both laughed. The business plan had started as 3 pages of notes in the hotel room on the same night she was building the folder of financial evidence. She had not fully recognized it for what it was. At first she told herself she was just thinking organizing thoughts the way she always did. But by the end of the first week, she had a market analysis, a pricing model, a list of 12 potential clients she already had relationships with, and a name: Carter & Company Events. Simple. Hers. She filed the business registration 6 days after signing the divorce settlement. She called Margaret to tell her. "Carter & Company Events," Margaret said, slowly savoring it. "That's beautiful." "I'm keeping the name," Emily said. "It's mine. I earned it." "You did," Margaret said, and her voice held something warm and uncomplicated, the pride of a woman for another woman, clean of any guilt or complication. "I'd like you to be my first client," Emily said. "Your church group, the fall fundraiser. You mentioned last year that the woman who usually organizes it has been struggling." A pause. Then, "Emily, are you serious?" "Completely," Emily said. "I need a first client who trusts me and gives me room to do it right. You're the first person I thought of." Margaret made a sound Emily had never heard from her before, something between a laugh and a breath that was trying not to become something else. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes. Come for lunch on Sunday and we'll talk details." "Sunday it is," Emily said. She put the phone down. She opened her business plan on her laptop. She added at the top of the client page, "Margaret Carter, first client." And she smiled, and it was a real one, uncomplicated and genuine, the kind she had not felt on her own face in longer than she could precisely remember. The first month of Carter & Company Events was quiet, in the way that all real beginnings are quiet, not visibly dramatic, not immediately successful, but full of the deep, specific work of building something from nothing. Emily took Margaret's church fundraiser and produced an event that raised 40% more than the previous years. She took a referral from one of Margaret's friends, a retirement celebration for a woman turning 70, and delivered something the family called the most beautiful evening they had experienced in years. She took a corporate client through a connection from her old vendor network and delivered a quarterly team event on time and under budget. By the end of the second month, she had 6 clients. By the end of the third month, she had 12. She hired her first assistant, a young woman named Priya, who was 24 and extremely organized, and reminded Emily in some ways of herself at that age, which was both gratifying and slightly alarming. Emily paid her fairly from the first paycheck and told her explicitly that she would always know exactly where she stood in this company. "I built something once where my contribution was invisible," Emily said during Priya's first week. "That will not be how this company operates. When you do something well, I will tell you. When something needs to change, I will tell you that too, directly." Priya looked at her. "That's literally all anyone wants," she said. Emily thought about Daniel, about 10 years of wanting exactly that. "I know," she said. Word moved, the way it moves in a city like Austin through social networks and referrals, and the particular kind of recommendation that only comes when someone has genuinely exceeded expectation. By the 6-month mark, Carter & Company Events had a waiting list. Emily stood in the small office she had rented downtown, 2 rooms modest functional. On the afternoon she turned down her first client due to capacity, and she felt the specific satisfaction of a person who has built something solid. Not the performed satisfaction of achievement, not the satisfaction of having proved a point. The deeper, quieter satisfaction of someone who has used what they know to make something real. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she still had saved, though she had not looked at it in months. Daniel. She stared at his name on the screen. She opened the message. He had written, "I heard about the company. I'm glad you're doing well. I've been thinking about a lot of things. I miss what we had. I miss you." Emily read it twice. She sat down. She thought about this birthday party, about the wrist, about the word situation, about $73,000 moved in secret over 18 months, about Rachel Morgan leaning close when she laughed, about a message that said, "Everything is set up, and I just need to get through this last thing." She thought about a parking lot, a minute of stillness, a decision. She thought about 6 months of mornings that started before sunrise, not because she was anxious, but because she was building something. About Priya learning the vendor negotiation process and getting it right on the 3rd try and looking up with the specific pride of someone who has just learned a real skill. About Margaret's fundraiser and the woman turning 70 and the corporate team that had emailed to say they'd be back next quarter. She thought about what it had cost and what it had given back. She put her phone face down on the desk. She thought about responding. She gave it real consideration because Emily Carter was not a person who made decisions carelessly. She sat with the weight of 10 years. She acknowledged it. She did not pretend it was nothing. Then she picked her phone back up. She deleted the message. Not out of anger, not to punish him, not because she wished him harm or wanted him to suffer or had any interest in the particular kind of score settling that would have required her to keep him in her life as an object of ongoing grievance. She deleted it because she was done. Completely, cleanly, entirely done. The way you are done with something when you have looked at every part of it and understood it fully and extracted from it everything it had to teach you and placed it behind you with both hands. She was done. She put the phone down. She opened her laptop. She had a proposal to finish for a client who wanted to host a celebration for 200 people in the spring, the largest event she had taken on so far, the kind of project that would have felt overwhelming 6 months ago and now felt exactly the size she was ready for. She started typing. 3 months later, on an ordinary Wednesday morning, Emily Carter arrived at her office at 6:15, made coffee, and sat at her desk with the day's calendar in front of her. She had a vendor call at 8, a client meeting at 10, a site visit at 2, a call with Priya at 4 to review the staffing plan for the spring event. She had a dinner with Diane on Thursday and lunch with Margaret on Sunday and a yoga class she had started going to on Tuesday evenings that she was, to her own mild surprise, actually enjoying. Her business had been running for 7 months. Her divorce had been finalized for 5. The house had sold 3 weeks ago. She had priced it well because she was good at those things, and it had sold in 9 days, and the proceeds had been divided according to the settlement, and she had signed the final paperwork and walked out of the closing attorney's office and felt the last physical tether to that chapter of her life release. She had an apartment now, 2 bedrooms, good light, a kitchen. She was slowly making her own. Diane had helped her move in. Margaret had brought a plant, a large, stubborn succulent that Margaret said had survived considerable neglect and was therefore appropriate. Emily had put it on the windowsill and watered it every 4 days, and it was against all reasonable expectation thriving. She sat at her desk on that ordinary Wednesday morning and opened her email. There were 11 messages waiting for her. She went through them one by one, the way she went through everything methodically, completely, with every detail registered. A vendor confirming availability, a client with a question about catering minimums, a referral from Margaret's neighbor for a wedding event in the fall that, if it came through, would be the largest contract Carter & Company had taken. She answered each one. She was specific, clear, and warm because those were the things she knew how to be. When she finished, she sat back with her coffee and looked at the wall across from her desk. She had put one thing on that wall, not a motivational quote, not a company mission statement. A photograph. A single photograph she had taken herself with her phone on the morning after the settlement was signed, standing in her kitchen at sunrise. It was a photograph of her kitchen table, the coffee mug, the open notebook, the morning light coming in at an angle that made the whole thing look by accident like something composed. She had put it there because it was the image that came to her when she thought about the beginning of this, the night she sat alone at a table she had built and started looking for the truth. That table, that mug, that specific quality of early morning light that meant I am awake before the rest of the world, and I am working, and I will find what I am looking for. She looked at it every morning, not as a reminder of what had hurt, as a reminder of what she had discovered she was capable of. Priya came in at 8:30, slightly breathless, carrying 2 coffee cups because she had learned early that Emily was always already on her second cup by the time she arrived, and she liked to contribute. The Morrison wedding inquiry came back, Priya said, setting a cup on Emily's desk. They want to schedule a formal consultation. Emily felt a small, specific surge of focus. The Morrison wedding, fall, 250 guests, 3 days of events, the kind of project that required the same systematic competence she had spent 10 years applying to someone else's life and was now finally permanently applying to her own. Schedule it for next week, she said. Tuesday if they're available, and pull together our portfolio from the last 6 months. I want to walk in there with the full picture. Already started it, Priya said. Emily looked at her. Good, she said simply. After Priya went to her own desk, Emily sat quietly for a moment with her coffee. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, standing in Lorenzo's event hall in a party dress she had chosen for a man who was about to tell her to leave. She thought about the parking lot, the phone calls, the music stopping. She thought about the way it had felt to walk out of that building carrying only her purse and her phone. She had walked out of that building with nothing visible, but she had walked out carrying everything that mattered, her own competence, her own clarity, her own unbreakable instinct for what was real and what needed to be done. Daniel had told her to leave, and she had. She had left the party and the marriage and the role of invisible architect and the decade of building something she was never fully allowed to stand inside. She had left all of it, and what she had walked into on the other side was something nobody had given her, something nobody could take from her, something she had assembled from the exact same materials she had always had. Her organization, her competence, her ability to look at a complicated situation and find the structure inside it. She had built Carter & Company events from a hotel room in 6 days while simultaneously dismantling her marriage. She had built a client list from 12 referrals in 7 months. She had built a life, a real one, with her name on the door and her coffee cup on her desk and a photograph on the wall and a succulent on her apartment windows, ill in a yoga class on Tuesday evenings and lunch with Margaret on Sundays, a life that was entirely, finally, unreservedly hers. The man who told her she was ruining his night had been looking for a way out for 18 months. He had found it, and so had she. Her phone buzzed. A calendar reminder vendor call in 10 minutes. Emily drained the last of her coffee. She sat up straight. She picked up her pen. She had work to do, and she was very good at it. And the morning was just beginning, and the life she was living, this life, the one she had built from the rubble of the one she had left, was entirely and irrevocably her own. The woman they told to leave the room had simply gone and built a better one, and she was never, not for a single morning, going back.